So I'm going to talk to you about urban raccoons and some of the work I've been doing over the past decade. I'm also going to sneak in a little opossums because we're talking about nocturnal animals. I love opossums. It's so great. So here we go. So this is what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about urban raccoon territory sizes. How do we know about that? How smart are they really? Spoiler alert, not as smart as you think. How do people in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area feel about raccoons? What does this mean for local wildlife management? And what about opossums? Because that's what I'm currently obsessed with. So the somebody before a few minutes ago asked me Lou asked me how did I get into studying raccoons? Well, I actually work in Kenya. I work the lions and hyenas and elephants and monkeys. I'm going in 2 weeks to work to there. And I work at the zoo with orangutans and gorillas and all these things. What the heck is with the raccoons? But about 15 years ago, some folks from PBS Nature and CBC Nature of Things came to me and said, we need you to come and do an interview for like a few minutes to talk about what we know about raccoons for this documentary we're doing. And I said, well, I can make it up, but we don't really know very much. And they said, what do you mean? I'm like, well, we don't really know very much. And they said, would you like to learn? I said, well, sure. And they said, well, how about if we fund a little bit of your research and we put that in the documentary, which is very unusual. And also I said, yes, immediately. And that's what this documentary was. So if you can find it on the CBC site. That was the first time we actually called Toronto Raccoon Nation. But I think it counts for the whole GTHA that we are raccoony. So as part of that CBC PBS thing, I said, well, we don't even know where they live. We know they're in our backyards. Of course, you see them all the time, but we don't really know very much. What we know about raccoons comes from raccoons in the wild, not urban centers. And so we know what their home ranges are. We know, where the males go, where the females go, their social behavior, all that kind of stuff. But we don't know anything in the urban environment. So the first step I said is we need to know where they live and what they're doing. So we got 5 radio collars, which at the time were $5,000 each, which, yeah, I know. I was like, wow, it's right. And we had to trap raccoons in different parts of Toronto and put these GPS collars on. Not as easy as it sounds. We had to use cat food to get them into the traps, and we could do that. We had to get permits and everything. There was a whole team of veterinarians. But then getting them to come back again to get the collars off in a few months, that was the hardest part. But the collars allowed us to have a really detailed look at where they spend their time. So every minute it would upload a location. So we got some really good information about where these raccoons were. And we found that raccoons have about 10 den sites on average. So they don't just have one site. They may have one site right now in your backyard. They may be spending the winter there, but when summer comes, they actually have about 10 sites in the urban areas, and they shuttle between those sites. And what you find is that sometimes people say to me, oh, well, I haven't seen raccoon for a week, so they must not be there anymore. It's like, no, they're just at their other houses. They have houses all over the place. And they're kind of like vampires. When the sun comes up, they choose the one that's closest to where they are, and that's where they spend the day. So we found that out. It was really interesting. More interesting for me is that we found that their home ranges were about 3 square blocks, really, really small. To put that in perspective, in rural areas, they can be up to 20 square kilometers is the home range. This is 3 square blocks. And what we noticed is that they rarely crossed major roads. So this is one raccoon, and every little dot in here is all connected up. And you can see that this raccoon lives right beside High Park. And I assumed I wanted to collar raccoons near the park, so in the beaches and High Park, because I thought they lived in the parks. But it turns out they live in our backyards, and they go into the park to check the garbage cans, and then they come back to sleep during the day, which was really surprising. So they're spending their time in our houses in our area. And they are not living in the parks. They're living in places where they can actually have a really nice den site. So I'm going to show you this. So you can see this is about, that's about 3 blocks. They're all around 3 square blocks. That's what we found is everybody was about 3 square blocks, which is not a very big area. They spend their whole lives in those 3 square blocks. It's not like they get on the GO train and go out. They are there the whole time. So we found just amazing data that they can find all their food, all their water, all their mates, everything in these 3 square blocks. And so I was talking to a taxi driver who down on the Danforth, which is Bloor, it's a big road. And I said, do you ever see raccoons? Because a lot of raccoons down in the Danforth. One of our collared raccoons was down there. And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, so, do you ever run them over? Like, what's happening there? I wanted to know, not on purpose, but accidentally. And he said, actually, raccoons never cross the Danforth. If they do, they only cross at between 4 and 5 a.m. And that's when the traffic is lowest. Now, that's pretty cool. So that's what we found with our collar data, is that they don't cross major roads. So those 3 square blocks are within a neighborhood. They don't cross major roads. Why? Because if they do, they get run over and they don't reproduce. So what happens if you're going to survive as a raccoon? You learn, do not cross a major road. And if you make a mistake, you don't often get another chance at that. So he said he had noticed that as well, that raccoons don't cross major roads except when the traffic is really low. In the city, you notice out in the country, they get swooshed by the cars all the time, which really upsets me. But in the city, that's why we don't have, tons of corpses of raccoons in the city. It's not, they don't get hit by cars all that often, or as often as you would think. So this was a very interesting study and very interesting documentary. It took 2.5 years to film. It was a beast of a thing. And when we did it, I thought, okay, well, I guess I better start studying raccoons. So that's what I've been doing ever since. So the next thing I thought of is, okay, these urban raccoons have been there a long time. They're in very small home ranges. They're overlapping with each other. So you may notice that you'll hear raccoons in the backyard. You don't just hear one, especially in January and February. You hear lots of them screaming like they're being ripped to shreds. They're actually mating. That's what's happening. And their social behavior has changed completely compared to the rural animals as well, so that they tolerate each other much better. They actually live near their siblings, and they overlap. The males overlap, which they don't do in rural areas. So they're very, very different. So I started thinking, if they're very, very different in these respects, and they've been there for 100 years, maybe we are selecting smarter animals in the city. And that's what the taxi driver got me thinking about that, actually. Like, so they learn not to cross major roads because they get killed. I don't think rural ones have figured that out. So are we actually creating a subspecies of raccoons, urban raccoons? Are they actually different than the rural raccoons? And they have been apart for many, many decades, which is long enough to have some cognitive evolution. So that's what I'm interested in with raccoons, are we making a smarter raccoon? Inadvertently, by every time we try to outsmart them and they figure it out, they're getting smart. And every generation is getting smarter. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about next. So after the CBC thing, National Geographic had some funding for National Geographic Explorers, which I am, and I've applied for that, to look at this difference between urban and rural raccoons. Try saying rural raccoons 850 times. It's very difficult to say. Every time I say it, I think rural raccoons. And they funded my research, and they actually did a series on it as well, because people like to watch raccoons. So what I did in this is I wanted to come up with some tasks to see how the two populations solved these tasks, to see if there were differences. Were they smarter in the city? Were they dumber in the city? What happened? So I came up with 2 tasks. The first task was super easy. It was just a bucket upside down. It had to be something I could get at Home Depot. Let's be honest, I had to buy everything at Home Depot. So I bought all my supplies at Home Depot. I needed many, 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 like 100 of these things. So the first task was just a bucket with food hanging upside down with food under it. Very simple, easy. All they had to do was look under the bucket and get the food. Simple. The second task, I wanted to have something real world, so I used a garbage can, which the Americans in Nat Geo call a trash can, but I continue to call a garbage can. And the garbage can is familiar to urban and rural animals, because rural animals do go to houses and cottages, and they are familiar with garbage cans. Thing about a garbage can is it's kind of a difficult problem because it's got a lid, and I put bungee cords over the lid. So it was difficult to get into, and they can smell the food, but the food is not located at the top where they're trying to get in. They actually have to, it's a two-step problem. And I put camera traps on all these things all across the GTA and all across Ontario. So this is the hanging bucket. This is the garbage can, in case you've never seen one with the bungee cord. And these are the sites in Toronto that I put both of the tasks, and they are separated by at least I think 5 kilometers. So I know they're not the same raccoons because they wouldn't go that far. And this is a bigger map of Ontario. So I did go Eastern Ontario up through Port Perry is the highest one, the most northern one, Gananoque, near Ottawa, and Midland. So I had areas that do not have regular garbage collection. That was important to me. Places that were not urban. They didn't have mail delivery. They didn't have regular garbage collection. And so my cameras, I have 800 hours of video on these cameras. I caught many, many things like this. A lot of rear ends, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of back ends of raccoons. I didn't show you that, but honestly, I just flipping through back ends of raccoons and dogs in the city. Back ends of dogs as they peed on my cameras constantly, all the time. And I also caught some bears. So this one was near Huntsville. And I was a little surprised because I was wandering around there putting my cameras up, not realizing there were bears there, but that was a surprise. So I did have over 800 hours of video from 2 field seasons. And I only used data the first time an animal attempted the task. Strangely enough, it's not hard to tell if a raccoon is the same raccoon as the other one. There are differences in their markings, differences in their tail markings, as well as their behavior. So I could pretty much tell. If I couldn't tell, I discarded it. So I only wanted to see, what do you do when you first see these things, raccoon? What are you going to do with these things? So what I could winnow it down to is 22 distinct individuals from the urban and the rural population. I know those are different individuals, and I know I got them on the first try. So these are the data showing, I would tell my students my X and Y axis legends are gone, but okay. Just to show you that this is the number of the 22 individuals who solved the task. So task 1 was the upside down thing. It was just, it swung, so it was a little bit disturbing, but they all figured it out. Every single one of them figured it out. So they tried it. The first bar is the ones that attempted it. All of them attempted it. All of them solved it. Task 2, which was the garbage can. All of them attempted it, and almost all of them solved it. Certainly a good portion of them solved it. One female I had took 8 hours. Yep, I have her on video for 8 hours. It was amazing. Yeah, she got it. And it was in a friend's backyard. And I went to pick up the camera the next day because I set it and I left. And my friend Virginia came and said, "Oh, I'm really sorry, the bin's not been touched. And, I guess you didn't get any raccoons." So I said, "No." So I looked at the video anyway, and she had been working on it all night long. She opened it up, finally squeezed herself in, got the cat food, came out with the cat food, and left the can perfectly intact. So Virginia thought that the raccoon hadn't been there, and she'd been there all night long trying to get in. So it was pretty amazing what I saw on the video. So that's the urban raccoons. These are the same data for rural raccoons. So you can see that fewer than half attempted it. Even the hanging bucket, if they attempted it, they solved it because it's really easy. A few more attempted the garbage can, and not one figured it out. Not one. I was like rooting for them on the video, going, "Yes, oh no!" And they didn't do it. So if you compare the two, you can see with the urban in the red, you can see there's wild differences between these populations. They are, if you were going to look at this, you would say this is non-overlapping populations. In fact, you'd probably say they were totally different species. They did not do the same thing. So the urban animals were less neophobic, so they were less afraid of the things, which makes sense. And they were much more likely to try different strategies. So they tried many more strategies than the rural animals. And they were much more persistent, as evidenced. 8 hours to solve the task. However, I can explain all of these very easily by saying, okay, urban animals are super fat. They are not food deprived in any way. They got all the time in the world, and they are not afraid of objects in human backyards. So they're going to just spend their time figuring it out. The rural animals are food deprived. They are afraid of people, and they don't have time. If they don't get something right away, they're going to move on because they're on the edge of starvation much of the time. So I don't know if these two groups differ because of where they live, because of the experience they have, or because this is a true innate genetic difference, that whether this is cognitive evolution or not. So what I'm trying to do now is study the babies. Oh, I know, you have to show a baby and go, oh my God, they're so cute. They are so darn cute. Because if these differences are found in the infants who've had no differences in experience, then we can be reasonably sure that the differences we're seeing are due to cognitive evolution, not just experience. Although I got to say, even experience is pretty interesting that you'd see the differences between the two. So what I've been doing for the past few years is working with well, orphaned raccoon kits that unfortunately their mothers get killed by cars and they get sent to sanctuaries, and you're probably aware of that. And so I have some sanctuaries where the kits come from urban areas and some sanctuaries where the kits come from rural areas. And one sanctuary, which is near London in St. Thomas, where we have kits from both, which is really great because they get the same experience. So they're raised exactly the same. This is these particular kits having their first day in the pool, seeing water for the first time in the pool, which is really, really cute. Many of them are afraid the first time they see the water. Actually, they didn't take to it as I thought they would, but they're very cute. And I have a little mini garbage can that is an exact replica of a big garbage can for little ones that I've been testing. And you can see this is actually an urban kit that is very, very interested in that. So I can do the same task. I can also look at other tasks to look at their response to novelty and their strategies they use and the willingness to approach novel objects. And that's what I'm doing now. The thing about infant or kits, I call them infant raccoons, but we should call them kits. They do not operate well on their own. They are like a little hive mind, like they have to be together. A single raccoon kit is a very sad thing. They are very, very afraid. They're not used to being on their own. And so psychologists like me, we like to separate individuals and study what individuals do, but you can't do that with a raccoon because they won't do it. They are very afraid. So I tried, and I've been trying. It's just very hard. So after a while, I just gave up and go, okay, just go for it. So if I have a gang of urban, they attack the cans. If I have a gang of rurals, they're a little standoffish. So my data so far are supporting the data that the adults have shown. So I don't have definitive, it takes forever, honestly. It's taking years and years and years to get enough of these animals to be sure where they come from. I can't just say, just take any kit. I need to know exactly where they came from. So, but so far, so good. So it does look like we are seeing a difference between the two populations based on their genetics, that they're born that way. They're not born smarter. They're born less neophobic. So they're born more likely to approach things and to give it a shot. I don't think they're brilliant. I just think that they are more likely to approach things and that they aren't afraid of novel objects. That actually is a bad thing if you're a rural raccoon. You should be afraid of novel objects because novel objects often kill you. So you want to make sure you're afraid if you're a rural raccoon. Urban animals have very few predators. Their predators are really cars. That's it. They're protected. You can't kill them. I get emails from people asking if they can club raccoons to death all the time. Why? What is wrong with people is what I always say to them. What is wrong with you? I don't know what it is out there that people want to club raccoons, but trust me, they are out there. And I say, no, under no circumstances can you club a raccoon. I don't know why I'm telling them that, but they are protected and you cannot hurt a raccoon. So the ones in the urban area, really the only thing that's going to kill them is disease or getting run over by a car. So they don't have much to fear. So it makes sense that they would be less afraid of novel objects, because novel objects are something to be explored. Whereas if you're a rural animal, novel objects are something not to be explored. So that selection makes sense to me. And I hope I'll be able to give you a definitive answer, but I would say I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. So, all right. So we have some differences between urban and rural raccoons in terms of their ability to solve problems, their ability to approach problems. And people often say to me, oh, they're evil geniuses. I used to say that myself. So before I started studying raccoons, I always would say, oh, raccoons fill the same niche as primates do in other continents. This is what I would tell my students. Very scholarly with no data whatsoever. I would just say this, and of course, it's not true at all. So I study primates, and I had assumed that because we don't have primates in North America, other than humans, I thought, well, that's kind of an interesting niche. They fill the monkey niche for us. They have the little hands. They're not quite opposable thumbs, but they definitely grasp. They do a lot of the things that monkeys do. So I assumed that they would be similar in terms of their cognition, how they think, but they're not. So I did a study comparing kits, raccoon kits, to puppies, infant dogs, we could say, I guess, and looking at object permanence. So you know what object permanence is. Object permanence is the idea that you know that if my hand is here and I move it down here, it's still attached to my arm. The object is permanent, even though you can't see it. It's a very simple task for us as adults, but children go through stages where they learn object permanence, and so do other species as they develop. They learn that objects actually remain even if you can't see them anymore. So you know the whole 3-card Monty task? Have you ever seen that? Where you have the cups and the guy on the street corner and you just follow the ball, puts it under the thing, you know? That's an object permanence task. So I thought, okay, well, let's study dogs, puppies at the same age, and raccoon kits and see how they do. Dogs have fantastic object permanence. They are great at it, and they're not using smell. Trust me, we use all the controls to make sure they're not using smell. They are not as good as humans, but they are pretty darn good. So they'll get to stage 5, which is pretty high. Raccoons, oh no, not the same. They're just not the same. So raccoon kits, oh, just so hopeless at this, just completely hopeless. So if I were to do this and take it away for a raccoon, they'd be like, oh, I guess it's gone. They have no idea that there's still an object there. So you show them food, and then you cover the food, and they just walk away because they don't realize the food's still there. Puppies never, ever do that. Puppies figure that out right away. So puppies at the earliest we tested was 60 days of age. They can do that task. And raccoons, I've tested 9-year-old raccoons. They still can't do that task. It's really, you watch them and go, oh my God, surely you're kidding. Like, you must have figured this. No, they cannot figure it out. Another thing I wanted to try was transparent containers. So crows and all sorts of primates for sure find transparent containers are a little confusing to begin with because you can see something in it and you can't get it, but they do figure it out. Oh, raccoons never figured that out. If you want to confuse a raccoon, just put it like a Tupperware thing with food in it. They have no idea what's going on. They try to get through it. They do not understand a transparent container. I also thought, okay, well, maybe raccoons like crows could use tools. So I had a container with food in it, and I had a string that they just had to pull the string to get the food out of the container. Oh, they could never figure that out. They ate the string. They destroyed the container. It was embarrassing for all raccoons everywhere to watch how sad they were at this task. Do not use tools. So you won't see raccoons using tools. You don't see them out there in the wild doing, crows will use sticks and do all sorts of amazing things with tools. You may have seen a video on YouTube with a raccoon using a rock on a window to try to get someone's attention. That's the only instance I've seen of a raccoon sort of using a tool, but I don't think they really thought it was a tool. I think they just had a rock and they were banging it on the window, and the woman came and gave them food. So it's an interesting video, but I don't think that counts. They don't readily use tools. That's why I said. And they do not plan ahead. This, I don't know if you can see this, but this is pretty much what I found for 800 hours, that they will figure out how to get into something and then say, oh no, I made a terrible mistake. I didn't think about how to get out of it again. So you may see on the news raccoons climbing buildings, raccoons climbing cranes, like construction cranes. It's because they don't, and they always call me from these things. Could you have a comment? I'm like, well, they didn't plan ahead, because they don't plan ahead. They see a thing, they go, interesting, and they climb it, and then they get to the top and go, oh, yeah, I don't know what to do now. And then the fire brigade has to come and get them down because they don't know how to get down. So that is a very raccoon thing. This is a very raccoon thing. Honestly, don't know how she got in there, but again, I've seen them do that, get into garbage cans. I have a video of, it's too long to show, but I have a video of, in my backyard, about 5 kits got into a garbage can with a bungee cord, and I have the video. They all climbed in, they knocked it over, they all climbed in, they're in there, and then the garbage can starts rolling, and they start going beep, 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 because they have no idea how to get out. There's five raccoons in a garbage can. It sounds like a joke, but they were really in there just screaming, have no idea what to do. And the mom, it was like watching a cartoon. The mom comes from the side and she just opens the lid and she's just like, all right, get out. And they're all file out again. I mean, it's pretty sad when you look. They are very excited about things. They do approach things, they get into things, but they do not think about the consequences. So they're not primates there, because primates are pretty good at thinking about the consequences of their actions. Not all monkeys, I gotta be honest, they're not that great, but certainly raccoons do not plan. So I talked about the person clubbing, asking if they get people clubbing the animals. So I did a little survey to find out, what do people think about raccoons? Because I was a little confused as to why random humans were emailing me and asking me these very strange questions. So did a little survey to find, what do people think about raccoons? And you can see here the demographics of the people. And most people think the GTHA has a raccoon problem. This was especially, I think John Tory said it's a war against raccoons. Rob Ford, his predecessor, said something similar. So people think the GTA, the area has a raccoon problem. And look how many people have experienced damage from raccoons. So either minor or significant, almost 80%. As anybody, I mean, I have, has anybody here had raccoon damage on their house or their decks or anything, cars or anything like that? I mean, it can be a small thing or it can be a big thing. I idiotically left a paint tray out on my deck with white paint on it. Came out the next morning, little footprints all over the deck. Oh my God. But that's a me problem, right? That's not a them problem. These are things that we've done. They just take advantage. They don't know. I think humans, we feel like idiots after these things happen. And so we blame the animals. I think that's what's going on here. So I don't know if you can see this in the back, but I asked, because again, the clubbing thing really upset me. These were suggestions from the mayor of Toronto and others about how we should reduce urban raccoon populations, ranging from removal to humane euthanasia, shooting, this was an actual thing that Rob Ford said, disrupting breeding, so that would be endocrine disruption, raccoon-proof garbage bins, or none of the above. And you can see that most people voted for raccoon-proof garbage bins. But there were, 10% said we should shoot them, which is a little disturbing, I think. The other, we didn't put clubbing in there because I thought it was too awful, but you can see that there are some people who are quite angry at raccoons. And the number one predictor of whether you really, really hate raccoons is how severe the damage is that you've experienced from them. So this is in behavioral data, a correlation of 0.9 is incredibly strong. This means if a raccoon has cost you money, you hate them. You hate them a lot. I have 873 people telling me how much they either hate raccoons or love raccoons. I would say it's about evenly split between those who love raccoons more than they can say and those who want them all removed from the city. So that was kind of interesting to see that it's actually damage that they're doing that upsets people. And so I've been working with the city, not working, but volunteering with the city of Toronto, looking at management strategies. And because of that survey, looking at green bins, they actually decided to invest in new green bins that were raccoon resistant. So they have new raccoon resistant green bins over the past 5 years or so. They've been introduced, and okay, I'll tell you the story. So this company called me and they said, we're looking to bid for the City of Toronto raccoon resistant organic bin bid. Would you come talk to us? And I said, okay, where are you? And they said, oh, we're in Mississauga. So I went to Mississauga. I drove to Mississauga and I talked to them for a couple of hours about raccoons and gave them ideas. And they said, thank you very much. And I never heard from them again. And then the City of Toronto said, hey, we have prototypes for the raccoon-resistant garbage cans. Would you like to test them in your backyard? I said, absolutely, I would. Let's do that. Let's put some cameras on. And one of them was my idea. And that's the one that won. Damn it. And they got $81 million for that contract, and I got zero. So I'm just slightly bitter about that. But I will show you this anyway, even though it annoys me. Here we go. Okay. So I don't know if we have sound. It doesn't really matter. This is testing raccoons on these resistance. So this is the old bin. And they get in, they get out. It was nothing to them. It was so super easy. Oh. Yeah, and that's what many people found in their yard in the morning. This is the newer one. You can see this is a very early test. And you can see the raccoons trying. So I don't know. I know I live in Thornhill and we don't have these bins. And I know Hamilton doesn't have these bins, but you probably heard Torontonians talk a lot about these bins. They are bigger. They're bottom heavy. They can only be lifted by gravity. They had to get special trucks. Yeah, I know. It's really sad watching them actually. They're super smooth. And then if they do get up on the top, what I designed was the handle. So because they don't have opposable thumbs, it's a handle that requires two hands to open. So it's physically actually impossible for them to do it, especially when they're sitting on it. It's impossible. Oh, I know. Sad. Oh, I know. You kind of root for them, I know. Oh, yeah. You got it. Now give it a try. See what you can do. I don't think so. So it's funny, they use their old techniques, right, of trying to go to the front and go in, but it doesn't work anymore. And they knock it over, which is difficult. Still doesn't work. Takes two of them, still doesn't work. So I had, in my backyard, I tested 3 prototypes. Actually, the raccoons couldn't get into any of them. It's just the people couldn't get into the other 2. So this is the only one that the people can actually figure out. So that's the one that won. That was hilarious, actually. So I've been looking at what's the effect of the new green bins, because people and I have been actually worried, like, okay, well, if they were relying on that for a source of food and we suddenly take that away from all the green bins in Toronto, are they going to move into Thornhill where I live, or are they going to starve to death? What's going to happen? So I spent a couple of years measuring dead raccoons, because why wouldn't you? So this is me measuring dead raccoons at the Toronto Animal Services. These are raccoons that have either died of distemper, but I disregard those ones, or who have been hit by cars. And I wanted to see how big they were. So I started a year before the bins went out to find out what the average size of raccoons, males and females, are. I did it around the year, so seasonal changes happen. And then I did it after the bins were introduced. So I wanted to see if body mass index changed. I wanted to see, are they getting thinner because they don't have access to the food? And if the bins were a significant source of food and they don't have any more, then our raccoons should get thinner. And that was kind of the idea. I know John Tory was hoping that was going to be true. He said, "Oh, we won the war against raccoons because they're going to get thinner." And I had given him this story again without any evidence that if they're thinner, they'll have smaller litter sizes, which is true. So if they have fewer babies, then there won't be as many raccoons, which is good. It's a natural way to cut down the number of raccoons. We have such fat raccoons in the city, in the GTHA, that the mothers have 5 babies, and that is extraordinary. So most places they would have 2 or 3. Ours are really, really having way too many babies because they have so much fat they can actually sustain that many babies. So the idea is if the bins are working, we should see smaller litter sizes. So 1 year before the bins, 1 year after the bins, and you can see there's no difference whatsoever. 0 difference. I measured a lot of dead raccoons to find that there's no difference whatsoever. So, never fear. The raccoons are going to be fine. And the bins are, and that's the females, this is the males again. They actually got a little fatter after. So I don't know. I don't know if they're figuring out the new bins. I don't think so. There have been a few viral videos of raccoons figuring out the new raccoon-resistant bins when they first came out. And so I was kind of excited because I thought, oh my God, the raccoons are smarter than I thought. This is great. I love it when they solve a problem. That's great. So I talked to the city and said, oh, I hear that they figured it out in Brampton because they had, I don't know why someone in Brampton had the bin, but they did. And the city said, no, we sent somebody out to check at it because they were excited too. And it turns out the guy had broken the mechanism and just did it for the video. So, yeah, and that got millions of views, and everyone's like, see, your stupid bins didn't work. It's like, no, not the case, but all right, sure. And also, they're not my stupid bins. But they, a couple of raccoons have figured out, and there's one female that I'm very proud of. I like her a lot, and we'll show you her video. Sorry, you have to watch an ad first. Skip this ad. Okay, so this female, this is downtown Toronto. She has figured out, you can see this green bin is wedged in between others up against a wall. That's the key. If they have a wall and they're smart enough, they can use the wall for leverage. If a bin is just sitting out in open area, they can't do it. But she's using bin for leverage. And what she does is she works it out and then she bashes it and the thing breaks open. So she didn't figure it out, she broke it. And that's the raccoon way. Whenever you have a problem, try to break it. That's what they do first. So she got in. And the thing about this female is that now the other raccoons in the neighborhood, which they don't teach each other, just so you know, they know she's figured it out. So they just wait down the alley. She goes in, gets her stuff, and then they come in afterwards and take whatever's left because they haven't figured it out, but she has figured it out. So a few of them have, but again, not the way you think. They can't actually physically open it the way we do, but if they break it, they can figure it out. And there have been some that I think rats have chewed holes in, and once there's a hole, man, raccoons are in like crazy. So there have been a few where raccoons have successfully got into the bins, but they haven't got in because they figured out how to have opposable thumbs because they don't have that. They're not going to get that, but they have figured out other ways to get in. So why are they still so fat? Well, I've been talking to some waste folks in Toronto, nonprofit folks as well, thinking that they're probably finding food in the regular bins. A lot of people still don't put organic waste in the green bins. They put them in the garbage cans. And so the garbage cans aren't protected in any way. So they've just moved. So I put cameras up around neighborhoods, and that is absolutely true, that they have moved away. They don't even go to the green bins anymore. They just go to the garbage cans. They have to go through a lot of other stuff when they're in that garbage can. It makes a total mess, but there's enough organic stuff in the garbage cans that they can still find food. So the moral of the story is don't put anything that can go in the organic bin in the garbage can because they will get in there. So certainly don't have to worry about them. They're fine. They're fat. They're happy. But we have tons left to learn. I'm trying, as you see, this work takes forever. Honestly, I go to Kenya, I get way more data just from lions than I do in raccoons. But we have lots left to earn. I know everybody here is into science. So if you've been on iNaturalist, Has anyone used iNaturalist? Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. I do have an urban raccoons project. I checked last night. It was 97,119 observations so far. Please, if you add photos, that'd be great. I have a student looking at that, and it's super interesting to see where the photos come from. And just in the last few minutes, I just want to talk about opossums. Well, they're nocturnal too, so I decided to slide that in because they're kind of related, and they are related. So they're not related evolutionarily, but they're related in they share territories. And so I did another Nature of Things on opossums this time, and we did a little experiment where I got chickens from Loblaws, you know, the rotisserie chickens, delicious. I staked them down in my backyard, and we put cameras up to see what happened. And the raccoons come first. They pull the breasts off the chicken because it's the best part, and the skin, and then they walk away because they're fat. And then cats will come, and foxes sometimes come. And the very last ones to come are the opossums. I know, I just feel for them. They're the scavengers, right? They're the cleanup crew, and that's what happens. They come at the end, and they're always nervous. The raccoons are going to come back, because sometimes they do, and the raccoons bully them and push them out of the way. The opossums will come and eat all the little things that are left over. So I thought, now's the time to study opossums, because they are oppressed, and we need to study them. So how many here have seen opossums? Yes, I'm so happy. So if I asked you that question 20 years ago, you would say, I have never seen one in my life except when I was in the US, because they weren't actually here. So they are Canada's only marsupial. There's a mom with her little joeys. They are so cute. I just find them so, I know people think they're horrifying, but I think they're adorable. This is a video in my backyard, doesn't show. So Lou was trying to get it to show, doesn't show. I could act it out, but it's just an opossum. That's fine. We don't need that. This is their standard. If you look at the Canadian Encyclopedia, this is the range of the opossum, the Virginia opossum, which is what we're talking about. And you can see that it's primarily in the US with little bits in Canada. So when you focus in on Canada, you can see, I'm used to teaching, so I move a lot, sorry. So you can see it's here, and there's a little bit here. Oh, what? What? Okay, let me explain. So the Vancouver part, super weird, up here on an island. What? How did they get there? Did they swim? They don't swim. What's going on? And there's a few, so that makes sense, over the border, but they're up on an island. Turns out, I gave a talk to some folks in BC, and they said, have you heard about the ones on the island? What are you talking about? In the 60s, two Americans brought a pair of opossums from the US and put them on the island. And they have been having a grand old time eating all the native species and completely extirpating everything else on the island since then. So that's why there's opossums there. And in BC, it makes sense because they are close to the border, but they actually aren't supposed to be on this west coast. They really are northeast or southeast animals, but they've come across. And this is what their distribution is. This is from my opossum iNaturalist thing. You can actually take a look if you like on iNaturalist. You can see these are people taking photos of opossums in southern Ontario. So you can see it's mostly around the GTHA. There are some, obviously, Detroit, a little warmer down by Sarnia. And then a few up to Montreal. I have cameras up in Ottawa. I've never seen one. There is somebody saw one there, but I've never seen one there. And as far up as Huntsville, I've got Wasaga Beach. So just a fellow named Reg sent me a video. I honestly don't know how people find me, but they do. And he was lovely. I just thought you might like to see it because it's a cute video. I can't get it to go, but it's a cute video. There we are. So he just sent me this. He made a little picnic table for them. I thought it was so cute. And he put it on the fence. And then he puts food for them. You can see what they look like. They've got that bizarre tail that makes people think they're rats. They're obviously not rats. They're marsupials. She just gets up on her little table and has her little snacks. And so he lives in Wasaga Beach. So they've made it up there. It's pretty incredible. Oh, I just love the way they eat. It just thrills me. Chomp, chomp, chomp. So, you know, they're an amazing species. They don't cause any harm whatsoever. They eat ticks. They're lovely. They only live a couple years. They're not like raccoons. They don't do any damage. They use dens of other animals. They don't make their own dens. Oh, look at that face. How can you not love that face? Just the best. Seriously. And the babies. Oh my God, so adorable. Anyway, we'll finish. So, you know, their climate change, um, I don't know. I was going to say warriors, but they're not warriors. They're climate change refugees. So they are new to our country. They've come because they can survive the winters, which they never could before. They still have trouble. This winter was great, but last winter was terrible. So many went with frostbite to Toronto Wildlife Center. They don't have protection. That little rat tail has no protection whatsoever, and they have to come out every day. Unlike raccoons, they have to forage every day. So raccoons will just sit out, let the fat take them through, but opossums don't do that. And so they do, they are susceptible to frostbite, they are susceptible to getting run over, they are susceptible to all sorts of things. If you want to take photos of opossums, please do. You can email them to me, or you can put them on my naturalist, and I will bring you a trail cam if you want. I'll do whatever you want. I really want you to prepare your friends and neighbors for the invasion of the opossums, because they are going to do really well, especially this year. And so many people, including Rob Ford, who is dead, I know, and I have said his name in vain, but he said opossums were the real threat to Toronto. It's, well, it's, anyway, what are you talking about? I mean, they are innocuous. Their only defense is to fall on their side and pretend to be dead. That's it. That's the whole thing they got. That's their whole portfolio, is that's what they do. So they fall on their side, they pretend they're dead. They actually are, their brain shuts off, so it's not like they're pretending. They actually aren't conscious. And they release an odor that makes it smell like they're dead. So dogs come up to them and go, ooh, and run away. That's it. That's what they do. So they're not going to hurt anybody. They're not going to bite anybody. They have 50 teeth, which is the most of any. They have a lot of teeth. So I think when they open that mouth, people are like, yikes, what the hell is that thing? But it's not going to bite you. It's just showing you because it's afraid, and then it's going to fall over. So there is no danger from opossums. So please tell your friends and neighbors about the wonders. What I've been doing this past winter is looking at building little dens for them, little shelters for the winter, because they do get frostbite, and testing out which ones they like. So try to tell your friends you're doing opossum house tests. They go, what are you talking about? But I build different ones, different sizes, to see which ones they like. That's what the video was of the one. It was kind of like Goldilocks, where there's one that's big, there's one that's small, and she shows the one right in the middle, and it was just right. And she got in there. It was really great. So again, Home Depot, so not expensive, about $20 each if you'd like. I can show you how to make one, and you can have one in your backyard, save some opossums. So please tell your friends and neighbors and prepare them for this invasion that is happening, whether we want it or not. They are quite lovely. And so I thought this was lovely. This is from the US, but it's, you know, we can coexist. I think this whole club is about that. But please tell other people, because I've had so many people say, oh, we have to get rid of those disgusting things. And they are the opposite of disgusting. They are quite lovely. And we should be happy that they're here. They're newcomers. Let's welcome them. And thank you very much. And please email me anytime.
I read recently that if you find a baby, that mom's probably not coming back for it because she has so many babies on her back, she doesn't know if he fell off.
Yep, you're right. So yes, the comment was that if you find an opossum baby, you know how if you've had a baby squirrel, you got to leave it because the mom's going to come back, or a kid, a raccoon kid, leave it because the mom's going to come back. But opossums is not the case. So she can have up to 22 babies, but she only has enough nipples for 13. So there's going to be some collateral damage, and that's what happens. These babies are super, super small. So at the wildlife sanctuary, to feed them, you actually have to use tiny, tiny piping and try to get it in the right hole. Like, they're really, really tiny. It's very difficult when they're very young to keep them alive. So that's nature's way. But it's awful hard when you see them, right? Because they're awfully cute. So she will keep them in her pouch. When they're born, they're like this big, like the size of your thumb. or less. And they're marsupials, so they go in her pouch, and then they gradually, as they each latch on, 13 of them can latch on, and they grow, and then they get up on her back. If they're on her back and they fall off, she won't know either, because there's, she's got a lot of babies, so you got to learn to hang on, and that's selection at its finest, right? Like if babies don't hang on, then that's it for them. So that's absolutely true. Yes.
So if we're having that many young, is this yearly?
Yes.
So that's like a huge reproduction rate.
Yes.
Is there a high mortality rate?
Yes, absolutely there is. And these are questions we don't actually know. Certainly in Toronto, we don't know. I think people in the US have studied opossums, but to them, they're pests, right? They don't like them. They study them for disease transmission and those kinds of things. That's why I'm trying to study them here, because we don't know anything about how many of their babies survive. I suspect not that many. And I don't know how many of them even survive the winter. So Toronto Wildlife Center has a pretty good idea of what comes in. So we use that as an estimate of how many are surviving. But yeah, lots and lots of babies, but not very many make it. And they don't live very long. So raccoons in the wild are lucky if they make it through their first winter. And, some of them will be 3, 4, 5 years old. In the zoo, they live to be 20, 22. Raccoons are the only species I've ever worked with that break into the zoo to live in the exhibit. Constantly, every summer, raccoons come in and live in the exhibit. So the keepers have to take them out and say, no, this is not for you. You have to go somewhere else. No other species will break into the zoo. They're very different. I think that's why we like them so much, right? They're lazy. They like to sit around and eat. Like, that's what I like too. So, but opossums, it's a hard life for them. It's a hard life for an opossum. Yes.
What makes it different that like they can't carry rabies compared to other mammals like raccoons? And what's the difference genetically? Or
they're not true mammals, so the rabies virus doesn't respond the same way. They're marsupials, so they are a wildly different species than anything we've got, which is why they're so interesting. And you can always tell they're, if you look at the teeth of a mammal, you can always tell what they're related to, and they have 50 teeth. Ooh, that's 50 teeth. Well, they do. So they're just an unusual species for us. And that's why I think people sometimes react badly, because they go, what the hell is that? Looks like a raccoon and a rat and something else had a baby. Like, it seems not like a normal thing. But we are getting used to it. Everyone in this room has seen it. And people are starting to understand, oh, it's an opossum. And I'm sure you've seen roadkill out there of opossums. Are there any roads in Hamilton that you've seen more roadkill from opossums? I'm very interested in that, to see if females are more likely to get killed. Yeah.
It's someone Coots Drive in Dundas.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay, I'm gonna take a look. Yes. Who's
I was just going to say that I typically see them. I can explain later, but I typically see them often in wetlands, in watercourses.
Well, they're interesting. So they're going across to get water.
Or that's their habitat.
Yeah, they actually prefer kind of mixed use habitat. So they like disturbed habitat, which is why I'm actually studying them in BC as well. I have cameras up there, because the agricultural lands, once they come across the border towards Vancouver, there's a lot of farmland there and houses. They like that because they'll live under the houses and go in the farmland. So they do like mixed use stuff. So I think that's why the GTHA is pretty good, because it's got a lot of that. And they seem to be able to survive. But I do think that if females are preferentially getting killed by cars, then there will be a population problem. So I'm interested in sex ratios in traffic mortality. Yes, in the back.
I was going to ask.
Oh, sure.
Is there a significant difference between male and female raccoons?
In terms of?
Do they look different?
There's size difference. So they're sexually dimorphic in size, but they don't look particularly different. Their heads are slightly different. That's after you watch enough of them, you kind of go, oh yeah, it's like a male. But I realize I'm actually using behavioral cues, not anatomical cues. When I was measuring the dead raccoons, I got really up close and personal with the differences. Raccoon penises are really hard to find. That's your fact for the evening. It's very difficult to find a raccoon penis. So they're usually retracted. And so there really aren't that many differences other than size. The largest raccoon I pulled out of the magical bag at Animal Services, because they came in these black bags, and I was always like, oh, what a great, terrible Christmas present this is, and I have to open a bag with a dead animal in it. But I picked one up and I thought, oh, this is a coyote, because it was so heavy I could barely lift it, and it was a raccoon. It was a big male. So the range of sizes for the males is much higher than the females. The females are like 6 kilograms, but the males can double that. So it's a size thing. But when they're juveniles, you really can't tell the difference. To answer your question, no. Pink shirt in the back.
Two questions. One, are opossums nocturnal?
Yes.
And two, can you think of why they would have 50 teeth? Like, is there any advantage that that particular species would have over something else that might say have 30 teeth?
Yes, they're nocturnal. I think marsupials generally have more teeth, so it's just a marsupial thing. So marsupials are not true mammals. They are marsupials, which is almost mammal. So they have a different dental pattern, and I don't know why. That doesn't really help them with what they eat. It is a nice display, like it's a fear display. I don't know what advantage it provides. They certainly can chomp through bones pretty easy, but lots of mammals who don't have 50 teeth can do that as well. So I think it's just a function of them being kind of weird, not mammals.
So when they play dead or go unconscious,
Mhm.
how long are they out for?
I tried to find this. It seems to be a range. It's not a minute though. Like it takes a while. So their brain actually has a trigger, it shuts it off, and the scent comes out. And sometimes can be like that for hours. And then when they wake up, they're all discombobulated, like what the hell was that? Like it, and they're kind of, and then they go back about their day. So if it's just I've seen it like half an hour, but then sometimes people say up to 3 hours. So yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, it looks dead. And so if you see one, don't like scoop it up and put it in the garbage or anything, because it's really probably just plain dead. In the back.
Did you comment at all on the net ecological effect of a high raccoon population? Like presumably, other than vectors of disease or going from your trash can back, does a large raccoon population have an effect on other urban wildlife?
Well, that's an empirical question, which I'd love to know. I do think that disease transmission is what MNR has been focusing on. That actually there have been some rabies in the Hamilton area. That's what triggered the latest. They call them ravioli. The rabies vaccine is delivered in little ravioli to keep the disease transmission. It's rabies that they're worried about. Honestly, that's the thing. So I think for the human population, it's disease transmission. In terms of the ecological impact, they are native. Okay, so they are endemic to North America. They're supposed to be here. So it's very difficult to look at the ecological impact, especially in urban areas where there isn't that much other wildlife. But I can tell you that raccoons have been imported into Japan and South Korea and Germany. Oh, this is so upsetting to me. And South Korea, they have raccoon cafes. And Japan, they brought them in because there was a cartoon that was really popular. And they got raccoons and then realized, oh, this was a bad mistake, because raccoons are actually bitey, terrible little creatures when they grow up, and you don't want them in your houses, and so they let them go. And so those countries are really great to see the impact of a raccoon that is not endemic, should not be there, and that destroys everything in its path, eats all the birds' eggs, eats all the small mammals, eats all the crayfish, any seafood, everything. And so they, in Japan, are kind of at their wits' end. And Germany, there are places in Germany that have the same density as Toronto. So in those areas where the wildlife is unprepared, it has a huge negative impact. In our area, I don't think it has a huge negative impact because they're endemic. And in the urban areas, they're not really pushing out the wildlife. So in rural areas, their density is just as low as it's ever been. They're not endangered, but they're not doing anything that they're fitting in just the way they normally would. But you can see how destructive that species can be in an area that in which they didn't evolve. So somebody had a paper a few years ago about, with climate change, the areas that will be habitable by raccoons is pretty much everywhere. And so now that they're in Europe and there are some in Russia too. And now that they're in Asia, God help them all, because they just move through. They're gonna outcompete everything. Nothing is prepared for the invasion of the raccoons, but we are. Lou in the back.
What would make raccoons avoid a whole parking lot area where they used to fight over? It has a ton of food, but all of a sudden, this woman does not see any for months.
I'd like to put cameras up and see if they're coming when you're not there, because they often come at 3 in the morning. So I don't know if she's there at 3 in the morning. But I've had people say, "Oh, yeah, now you can put cameras up, but I don't have any raccoons in my backyard." And my friend Norm did that, and I found 51 raccoons in his backyard. So I would hazard a guess that they are there. Otherwise, I can't tell. Maybe they all decided this is off limits. I don't think that's what happened, because they don't operate that way. If there's food, they go. Has the food been disappearing? Okay, I need to put a camera up. So tell me what the secret location is, and we'll see what happens. It's really interesting to watch. Yes, Rachel.
Another question. You say that you track a lot of them within those like 3-block radius. Is there ever a risk of like inbreeding
You
in
bet.
that kind of situation? And
Yep.
how does that help or not with their evolution? If they're getting smarter, like what contribution does that have?
Well, again, I don't know, because we haven't done genetics on it. Nobody wants to give money to study them, because they're like, raccoons, no. Lions, yes. Raccoons, no. We won't give any money. So I don't know. We'd have to do DNA analysis, but I suspect that's the case. The thing about the density in Toronto is that there's enough raccoons in that 3 square blocks that they aren't related to them all, and they don't live that long.
Do they know if they're
They know who their litter mates are, for sure, so they wouldn't breed with them. So I think they can disperse just enough that they would breed. And if, again, they don't live very long. So, but it probably has something to do with, I think evolution is happening really fast in the urban areas, because the density so high and there's so much breeding. So it's probably making them strange, and I don't know. I'd love to do DNA. Yes.
Did you make a comment that possums are fairly new to the area?
Yeah.
How new are you thinking?
Rob Ford did the first stupid statement in the 90s.
Okay, I thought it was later than that.
No.
Because to say, I had possums living under my deck in 98 and
Yeah,
99.
that's about the time. I think it was probably.
Stony Creek had
Probably. They didn't make it to downtown Toronto. I saw my first one in Toronto outside the MacDonald's at 3 in the morning. Please don't ask. In a gutter. And it was in a gutter, and everyone was gathered around. I just admit people were slightly inebriated, but we're all gathering around saying, "What the hell is that thing? What is it doing in the gutter?" And that was like 1999. So it's around that time. I'll go in the back.
I was just wondering if they hang out in groups or not, because last fall I saw a couple in my backyard who were mating, and it went on for a long time, and then off to the side I noticed another one that I figured must have been the male waiting for his turn.
Yep. Yeah, that they don't hang out in groups at all, but when they're mating, all bets are off. So that's what was happening. But yeah, they are solitary, and so you'll see them by themselves, or the mom with all the joeys. And as soon as the joeys are on their own, 3 months, they're off doing their own thing. Yes.
I understood when we first started to see the white ones, that they came in under trucks. That's how they first came.
That's what they said. I don't know. I mean, these stories, I mean, I make up half these stories, and I, so I said, some journalist said, "How many raccoons are in Toronto?" I'm like, 100,000. Totally made up. And now I see all these things. Well, there's 100,000 raccoons. Absolutely made it up just so they can hear them. So I don't know if that's a true story or not. It could be. They could be on trucks, absolutely, from the southern U.S., but I suspect it's just that the winters are such that I think they probably can come through the Frontenac Arch area. That's where a lot of species come through, so that it's sort of a natural progression. But there may be some that also hitch rides for sure. It's a great story. I'm gonna tell it. Yeah, him and on trucks. Yes.
Past they hibernate in any way, shape, or form, or they change their hibernating
patterns since climate change?
They have not, no. So that's their downfall, is that they have to deal with our winter. So you'll see them out in the coldest nights, even in snowstorms, trudging around looking for food.
Talk about passing the disease.
Yeah.
I was thinking, well, maybe it's too cold. They just slow down.
I think they probably do slow down, but it's because they're frostbitten. So I don't know if you've ever seen one, but if you see them now and you see their ears are kind of black and like shriveled and their tails, they had frostbite. They have no protection at all. So, and they don't hibernate. Raccoons don't hibernate either, but they're much less active. So on cold days, they don't come out. But
So I was just wondering if with climate getting less cold during winter, whether it's going to foster their presence.
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's raccoons too. I mean, I consider them similar. They're nocturnal species, but I'm from Edmonton originally, and Edmonton and I lived on the river valley, and there were no raccoons. There was bears, there was elk, there was everything. There's no raccoons, and raccoons have made it to Edmonton, so they can survive Edmonton winters, which is pretty extreme. So everything is moving north, right? And possums are now, yeah, no different. Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of coyotes in my neighborhood.
Mhm.
Are you finding that they're making an impact on culling raccoons?
So coyotes and raccoons are both mesocarnivores, so they're both at the same niche. I have seen coyotes with dead raccoons, but not very many. So they compete for the same food, but one is not a predator of the other, not a natural predator. I think if there was a fight, a coyote would win, but I'm not sure. I have tons and tons of hours of video in backyards with raccoons and cats. And people are always like, oh, they're going to eat my cat. Not a chance. I've never seen a raccoon. The cats always win. Raccoons are like, okay, and they take off and go on the fences. They never saw a problem with that. And dogs obviously will kill a raccoon. But coyotes, I think they have sort of a understanding. Yes.
So I have a lovely raccoon that leaves me presents every morning at my fire escape outside.
Lovely.
Lots of scat,
Mm-hmm.
and I hear it's toxic, but I don't know like what is toxic about it.
So raccoons carry raccoon roundworm, which is not a nice thing. You can look that up afterwards and realize how not a nice thing that is. Children who ingest it can actually die. It can go to your brain. It's not a good thing. So you don't want to touch their poo. You certainly don't want to eat it. I mean, in case any of you was thinking about it, just don't. Raccoons use latrines, which is why they like your fire escape. This is their bathroom. So it's not just one. They're coming and using it because it's happy for it.
Also like bones and stuff they leave.
It's great. So if you
So how do I not get rattled?
so don't clean it with your hands.
Okay.
Gloves are okay. I would wear a mask. I take my own advice very little, so sometimes I don't wear a mask, but I shovel it and I bleach where it was. Yeah. I've had people, oh my God, I had a poor person from California contact me and say, there was a raccoon in my yard and my child's in my yard. Now my child is going to have roundworm. What is wrong with people? There's a raccoon in your yard and now your child's in your yard, so you're going to get roundworm. No, you're not. That's not going to happen. But if you touch the poo, and you eat it, then don't do that. But it's just having it there isn't going to, I know, it's really tough. Like, really, really hold yourself back and don't eat that poo, but it's going to be okay. Just dispose of it, put it in a little bag, bleach the area, you'll be fine. What I have found, and I'm not just making this up, I actually tried it. If you put aluminum foil, tin foil down, they do not like that.
Okay.
So if you put it in that spot, they will find another spot. Your neighbor's spot, probably. It really does work. There's something about the tin foil on their feet they don't like. People try like chili pepper, stuff like that, didn't know. I also use onions. This is a very cheap solution. If you cut an onion in half and rub it, they don't like the smell of onion at all. So if they have leftover Indian food or whatever, they always pick the onions out. That's how I knew that onions are a thing. So if you rub an onion, they will stay away. The issue is when it rains, the onion smell's gone, so you have to keep doing it, but it's a very cheap solution. But tinfoil absolutely works. So I told a friend, she had it on her deck. I said, put aluminum foil. She's like, you're insane. She did it. Absolutely worked like a charm.
And you just put it flat?
Just put it flat. Yes.
What would happen if your pets ate this? Is that dangerous?
Well, that's an excellent question. I don't think your pets would eat it. It's gross. I mean, even for a dog, it's gross. Yeah.
The deer.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's they're vegetarian. Raccoons are not. So I don't. You shouldn't let them. That's my answer. Don't let them eat it. Cats would, no self-respecting cat would ever eat. But a dog might. Yes.
Are there any other animals that have evolved this playing dead trick? Like are they
Snakes. Yeah, skunks. No, I don't know. Oh, the goats, the fainting goats. That's a good one. So the fainting is a gene. It's a gene that some goats have, and they fall over. But it's not the same. So it's not the same process. It's as a adaptation. It's pretty great, really. It works really well. This fainting goats is a weird thing. Yes.
There's a snake.
Is there a snake? Oh, it just falls. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it rolls over.
Rolls over. That's right. Yeah. So it looks dead. Yeah. I think lots of species play dead, but this pattern, this whole sequence is really something to behold. I had a video on there, but it wouldn't work. But they really do look like, oh God, I've been shot or something, and then it just mouth open and the smell, and it's very impressive.
Do they choose to do that, or is it like
They don't
happens
choose.
and
Yeah,
triggered?
it's not. They're not intentionally doing it. So they have no control over what. It's not like they keep one eye open to see if the dog. They're actually just out. More questions from online, Ruth? Good. All right. All right. Well, it's 9 o'clock. I'm cognizant that you don't want to go home, so.
It's daylight savings.